Welcome back to the MMA Business Hour, everyone. In today's episode, we're going to discuss UFC 291 fight between Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green happening at lightweight on Saturday. This fight should be fun as long as it lasts. I just can't see any situation where Tony Ferguson wins this fight unless he uses his wrestling. We saw against Islam Makhachev that Bobby Green's wrestling is not super good, and Tony was an elite wrestler in college. That seems to be his only path to victory. But we all know Tony Ferguson might be the most stubborn UFC fighter on the planet. He's going to march forward right into Bobby Green's traps. And I think Bobby Green is going to smoke Tony Ferguson and not only finish him in this fight, but finish his career in the UFC. Tony Ferguson is on this 5-fight losing streak. He's lost to Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira. Man, this slide has been sad to watch. I think Tony Ferguson had a 13-fight winning streak before this slide happened, and he was one of the most exciting fighters to watch. That fight against Donald Cerrone was absolutely amazing. Tony would use his elbows and knees and weird, awkward style to keep fighters off balance and get wins, use his submissions, use his wrestling. But lately, he's just been marching forward, and that's exactly what happened against Michael Chandler. We saw Tony Ferguson march forward. He actually won that first round against Michael Chandler, if you remember, guys. So he was marching Michael Chandler down, and Michael Chandler unleashed that front kick to the face from hell and put Tony Ferguson's lights out. And Bobby Green, that's how Bobby Green fights. He wants the guys to march straight forward and get in a firefight where he can kind of counterpunch. Bobby Green's kind of like Philly shell style with his hands real low, works the best in counterpunching. And Tony Ferguson, if he moves straight forward, we're going to see him get KO'd once again. Bobby Green is most effective when guys are throwing wild punches at them, and he can kind of step away, step back, use his reach to bang jabs to the face and come over with a big right hand. Tony Ferguson does have a significant reach advantage in this fight at 5.5 inches, but I don't think that's going to matter much. He's just too slow. His strikes are super telegraphed these days. He's not that elusive, kind of deceptive fighter he once was. But, man, if Tony wants to win, anyone in his corner, just get him to wrestle, man. Shoot in on Bobby Green, and those submissions will definitely open themselves up to him. But Bobby Green, I think he's too young, he's too hungry, he's too strong. And I see him beating the living breaks off of Tony Ferguson. I would be shocked if this fight lasted 3 rounds. Tony Ferguson is the most durable guy I've seen in the UFC in the last 15 years. But as of late, he puts himself in harm's way to get knocked out. He will not submit, but you don't have to worry about submissions with Bobby Green. Tony Ferguson is going to march forward, and he's probably going to get picked apart. I'm a huge Tony Ferguson fan, but his stubbornness gets him into trouble. It worked well for all those years, but now that he's an older, slower fighter where his cardio is not as good, his jab's not as good, he is just not the same fighter he was 7-8 years ago. And Bobby Green should easily get the win. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Ferguson retired or the UFC just releases him after this fight. I don't see Tony really taking off the gloves and making an official retirement. I don't see that happening. I think the UFC is going to have to take him out of his UFC contract and not let him fight in the UFC. But I could see Tony Ferguson going that kind of Diego Sanchez route. Well, he will fight in any organization that takes him. He's a perfect guy to go fight in the PFL, another name brand, going to the PFL. But I don't think there's a place for him in the 155 division in the UFC any longer. So Bobby Green's coming in at minus 400 right now, so I'm not laying any juice on that. If you want to add some extra odds to a parlay here and there, you could possibly do that. But I'm not betting this fight at all whatsoever. I don't know. I haven't seen the Bobby Green by finish, but Tony Ferguson is a hard guy to finish, so I just don't like this fight at all from a betting perspective. But We're going Bobby Green to get the win against Tony Ferguson. It's sad to see, but Tony Ferguson's career in the UFC will most likely be over after this fight. And Bobby Green will get his hand raised, and Tony Ferguson will go on a 6-fight losing streak. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know in the comments below what you guys are thinking with this fight. What are your predictions? If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you guys on the next fight. Peace!